Hi guys, it's Kelly here and I'm back with another video for Altenew. Today I am going to be using the Feathered Beauty, the Arched Foliage, the Timeless Sentiments 3, or the also known as the Holiday Timeless Sentiments. And then here I showed you the Mountain Pine, but I actually ended up using Dewdrops. And then I am using their cold pressed watercolor paper. So they sent me, which was very kind of them, these Watercolor Compacts to try. There's two of them, and these were designed in conjunction with Sarah Simon, also known as the Mint Gardener, who apparently does really wonderful watercolor. I'm not familiar with her work, but now I am intrigued and will probably look it up. But basically, you have these compact palettes, so they have a really great array of colors for you to be able to do a lot of color mixing, and it has a built-in palette. So the one that I am swatching first is the Deep Muse, and then the colors included in this one are Raspberry Rose, Lilac Burgundy, Golden Ochre, Mossy Oak, Still Waters, and Origin Umber. Very big fan. Really, really like this. When we get into the card, we're going to do a lot of color mixing. And so you can see how that you can make different colors with these, but big fan of this combination. And then the second one is the Moody Brights, which has a Magenta Crimson, Velvet Berries, Peachy Glow, Lemon Drops, Mermaid Green, and Starry Night. Also a big fan of this one. This one is, as the name would suggest, a bit brighter, but I think that they're both really beautiful. I do like, I know this is going to be shocking, the Deep Muse one just slightly more, even though it is a little bit more desaturated. I just feel like when I am watercoloring, that's kind of what I reach for. So anywho, what we're going to do today is watercolor some die cuts, which honestly, I have never really messed around with too much. Like I've done the Distress ink watercolor die cuts, but not really with like an idea in mind or a technique in mind for how they would come together. For the Feathered Beauty layering die set, this is so well put together, because in the set you have the bird, but then you also have the flowers and the leaves, and on their little sheet, it's even marked off like what dies belong to the bird, what dies belong to the flowers, and what dies belong to the leaves, which makes it super easy when I'm die cutting and I want to do, like, I die cut more leaves and more flowers than just the one set. And so I was able to keep my bird parts separate from my leaf and flower parts pretty easily, just based on knowing what dies were or what. So once I got them all separated, I then also like to separate them by color. So that's what you see me doing there. So that way I know what I need to add color to, and what color families I'm adding them with. And then for this first kind of watercolor technique, I'm going to do a little bit of color blending here. So I used the Velvet Berries, and then I mixed in a little bit of the Lemon Drops to give me more of a tomatoey kind of red. The Velvet Berries was very on the cool side, which means it has more purple in it. And I wanted it to be more on like the truer red side. And then for this technique, it's almost going to be like we dipped our feathers into watercolor. So I am getting all of my, these are all cut out of watercolor paper. I think you saw that, but just in case. I'm getting them all wet with clean water, and then this is going to allow them to be really saturated, and anywhere that the paper is wet, the pigment will flow. And so once I have everything wet, I can go in where I want it to be the darkest and start adding in pigment, and then it will feather out on its own. Feather, no pun intended. But it will kind of feather out and bleed out into that water on its own and create a really soft look. And I thought that it would be so pretty for the feathers, because, you know, like the way that God created feathers, nature, they just, they flow out and they color change. And so I wanted them to come out to kind of like white or lightish tips. And then you'll see as I'm going along, as long as they are wet, you can continue to add pigment. And that is what I'm doing. So while they are still wet, I'm just going back in, getting a more concentrated color, and then dropping that back in, hoping that the edges will get darker, like the edges that we're dropping the color onto will become darker than the lightest edges that we're kind of letting it bleed out into. So I am using I think I used a number 3 round brush for the most of this. And then I'm also going to use the 1-inch flat brush. I did want to mention Altenew is very generously giving me an offer to extend to you guys. So from today, the 23rd through the 25th, Merry Christmas, they are offering 40% off their artist watercolor brushes for you guys. The code to get that is Kelly Watercolor. I will link that below. If you have ever, I like their brushes. I've used them for quite some time. So this isn't like I wasn't just trying them for the first time. I've used them for probably several years, I think, at least one, maybe two. So now here, once I'm happy with where they're at, I do want to pick them up so I can continue creating. So I'm just picking them up kind of out of their puddle. I blotted off the back, which will just help aid in the drying onto a paper towel. And then I just moved them off to the side. Then I'm going to work on the body and the head. So this is the same technique. It's just different pieces. So the body that will go on top, we obviously want to match the wings. And then this piece that will go on the head, there's actually like 2 base pieces for the bird. I hope that makes sense. And one of them is just meant to stay white. And that's where we're going to start attaching all of our wings and stuff to, but you can see it in the face where it just stays white. So then we have this body that goes over top of it, and then the top piece there is actually like the head portion that sticks out above the beak and stuff. I chose to do mine the same color, but I think that will be really helpful for like other types of birds you might want to do. I chose to do mine red because we're in the Christmas season and I wanted to be able to utilize this as a Christmas card if I needed it. So then here, now this is where color theory is a little bit helpful because I have all these rainbow colors, but I need black. And so I'm using the Moody Brights for this because I already had that puddle in there. So red's complement is green. And any point when you mix those two together, you're going to get a little bit of brown. But if you kind of play back and forth with the colors, and sometimes you have to add in a third color. But with this one, really, I had the yellow already in there in my red, and then I added the green to it, and then I was able to mix up my own black. It dries back quite a bit to like a gray, but just knowing how to mix those things is very helpful in extending out your colors. Now for the leaves, I'm not going to do a wet on wet technique, which is what we've been doing. I'm going to do a wet on dry, and this is going to give us a lot more intense color, but it's not going to give us as much smooth blending. So I went back to the Deep Muse compact for this. I started with Mossy Oak, and then from the Moody Brights, I picked up the Mermaid Green, and I'm just kind of letting them do their thing. I have told you guys this several times before when it comes to watercolor, when it comes to leaves especially, I do like a good variety of color. So this one is definitely going to be, like I said, less blending, more concentrated color. But honestly, that has its own moment too. So I cut 2 of the leaves, and then I cut like a half of a one. You can see it's kind of cut where it has like a straight edge, and that's because that I cut it that way so that I know that it will fit right up against the edge of my paper when I'm building everything together. So once you do these, you can go back in with more water and help them to kind of move around. I find just doing like 2 layers of color is enough to get them, has enough moisture on the paper to get them kind of blending to what I'm happy with. But if they aren't blending the way that you're happy with, you can always spritz them. Here, I wanted to do my flowers white, but I didn't want them to be stark white because flowers in nature do have, shadows as well. So I'm back to the wet on wet technique. I'm just using clean water. And then I'm going to mix up a little bit of the, what is that? The lemon drops. I'm going to mix up a little bit of that with just like the smallest touch of the Origin Umber. And then for my actual flower, because I want it to be white, I'm going to do the shadows kind of like a blue violet. So I'm going to use a little bit of Starry Night with a lot of water, so it's really, really desaturated. And then I'm going to drop in just a little bit of magenta to create more of a blue violet. And then I'm only going to kind of tap this in where those petals would be meeting the center. And then I'm just going to leave it and kind of let it spread into that clean water. I will go back in and pick up just a little bit more of the blue to make it just slightly darker. So that way I have a little bit more color towards the, towards the center of it. And then you can see the little, centers down there and to the left. That will be a dry on dry technique because they're so tiny. Like, I'm not even messing around with trying to get any kind of shading or anything like that. I'm just going to put that yellow color mix on there, and then I'm going to we'll just let them dry. So you guys have to bear with me. I am, I think I shared this with you in a couple of videos. I had gotten a cold from my kids. Well, I guess I shouldn't even say that. I shouldn't automatically blame my little Petri dishes. I could have gotten it from somewhere else. Let's go back to the card real quick. So here you can see this is the base body of the bird. And if you've never used Altenew dyes before, they have a keyhole system, which is great. So this one has an arrow, a snowman, and a T. And then you line them up. So the arrow is on the tail feathers, and then you line that up over the T so you know that they're aligned up properly. And then each one of these has I think 4 of like the white little wing caps. I did them white. You can obviously do them whatever color you would like. So then you line up each of the keyholes, and then you know that they're in the right spot. And then there is a top piece that will kind of cover those things up. For each of the wings, there is the snowman on one side and a T on the other. So that way you never accidentally use the back side of a wing, because it's really easy to see what goes where. Just the super easy to follow. The guide's right on the back of the die set. And I didn't have any issues putting it together at all. And that's saying a lot for somebody like me who doesn't like to chase around little die cuts. So anyway, back to what I was saying. I picked up a cold probably a week or so ago. And while it wasn't like the worst cold I've ever had, I was still able to, work through it and function and, take care of the kids and do the dinners and all of that stuff. It has left behind a lingering cough, which is weird because I didn't even have a cough when I was sick. So maybe one of you guys out there in the health industry can explain that to me. But when I am talking for extended periods of time, my throat gets very dry, and then it triggers a coughing fit. So I have to do my voiceovers with a cough drop in. And even then, sometimes I still cannot get through it. Like yesterday, I tried to get through one, and it just would not, I couldn't do it. I just could not stop coughing. Every time I started talking for longer than 30 seconds, I was back to coughing again. So I typically, obviously, would not be talking with something like with chewing gum or eating something. But in this case, if I want to be able to do it, I do not have a choice. So here I have all of my wings put together, and then these white pieces are actually, they kind of act like the same trim that those tail feathers have. There's just little white trim on the topmost layers of the wings. And then from there, we go on to putting the top piece that will, kind of hide all of those parts underneath it. And then to the face. That is also why my the last couple of videos have tended to be a little bit shorter, because the less talking I have to do, the better. But I cannot bring myself to just play music, because I don't think that anybody's learning anything through that. So here I've put on that top piece. Now I'm going to put on the actual head piece. That would be the piece that you could make a different color if you wanted to. And you can see here, like, where that little bit of white is peeking through, which will be the bird's face. So these pieces are a bit on the tinier side, but it was okay. I think I found it a little bit easier to use my tweezers to kind of work with these, though you'll see when it comes to the eyeball, I think I dropped it like maybe 3 or 4 times before I was actually able to get it onto the bird. Now, I chose to do them as watercolor. There it is. 1 time, 2 times. I chose to do them as watercolor, but watercolors notoriously dry back. And I do have a tendency to like a bit of a brighter color. So I do think that they're pretty. I think that if I do it again, I would maybe go back in after everything was put together and, maybe try to deepen up some of those colors to create some of those shadows that I really like. But I think on a whole that the overall look is very pretty, very blended. So you guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments. As far as life goes, I'm proud. You guys were probably in the same boat together, like just on the struggle bus. It has been crazy leading up to Christmas, and it normally is, because I work for myself. I have 2 dogs. I have 2 kids. I have a husband. Here's where I switched it. I originally did the 3D embossed background with that mountain pine, and I just didn't love it. So I switched over to the dewdrops, and I liked that a lot better. The sentiments have a sentiment and a shadow. I decided to cut the shadow out of vellum, and then I cut the peace and joy out of both white and evergreen, which is more of a bluish green. I mean, it's still a green, but it's more on the blue side. And then I am going to put this onto a white card base with just a little bit of a border. And then I'm going to do it more of like a diagonal design. So I'm going to have the bird kind of flying from the bottom right up to the top left. And then I will have some leaves in the bottom right and some leaves in the top left. The 3D embossing folder in the background is just going to help us to add some interest and fill in some of that blank space. That smaller leaf that you just saw me adhere, that one is actually the one that houses the flowers. Like, you can see how it has the little stems or vines that have like a little circle at the end, which is where the flowers are meant to go. I'm totally ignoring that. I'm doing my own thing. So for the peace and the joy, I did adhere the white over the evergreen, just slightly offset, so that you would be able to see the evergreen kind of like shadow down to the bottom left. And then this isn't so much so that it won't fit on its own shadow. It still will, but it's just going to give it a little bit of a lift because it has that little bit of darker color providing some contrast. And then with vellum, we always want to make sure that we're being conscientious of where we're putting our adhesive because it is see-through. And so if you put glue everywhere, you will be able to see it. So I like to glue my sentiment down to the vellum, and then that way I can flip it over and see where else I can add my adhesive, that it will be hidden. So then once I have that down, I will go ahead and glue that to the card. So now I have my, my bird done and my sentiment. And then now here is where I will take those flowers and start adding them in. Again, to create a little bit of balance, I will do less flowers with the less leaves in the bottom right, more flowers with more leaves in the top left. And you can just kind of put them wherever makes your heart happy. You don't have to necessarily follow, like I said, where that vine is supposed to be. There's a part of me that's like, should I done these another color? But I do think this feels more Christmassy with like the red and the white and the green, so I'm okay with it. Here I'm just adding some clear shimmer. I didn't notice that moving the watercolors around too much at all, so I was really happy with the way that they looked. Just a reminder that 40% off the watercolor brushes is the 23rd through the 25th. I will link that below. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that you have a wonderful Christmas Eve, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.